I guess in the summer of 2014, Larry and I started talking to each other about possibly having this farm project in Blue Island. And then in the fall of 2014, after we had a bunch of meetings with the city, we finally tilled a little patch here. It was probably only like a quarter acre at the time. And then planted some garlic that first fall. And then the next spring, 2015, is when we started.
When did you first meet the BIOS farm guys, Larry and Joe?
So I exchanged messages with Joe almost a year before we were opening because they started tilling the fields over there by the canal, and just started talking about collaborating on any kind of ingredients for beer we could do. And one of the first things that came up was something as simple as coriander from growing cilantro and the seed that comes off of that. And eventually, when they finally started producing vegetables and partnering with us in their CSA boxes and their farm stand, we already had a recipe idea for a cucumber lime wit beer that the produce was amazing looking, and the cucumbers and the 4 or 5 different varieties that they grew just were going to be a perfect complement to add that in that particular beer.
We started off by making a soda in the tap room that was cucumber lime, and that soda actually was born out of a beer that we had made as a test batch, which before that was a beverage that we had out in the market that had a cucumber lime combination. That it was something I'd never come across before, but when I did, the flavors were just so perfect that we kind of did test batches and then sodas, and then finally we decided to go all in when we did the big batch on it. Last year's went pretty well. It went well enough to where we did it in the middle of the off season for cucumbers, which, you know, it kind of reaffirmed why we get them from BIOS. The cucumbers from hot houses, they just weren't quite the same. They didn't have the variety. We got 1 variety instead of the 4 that we get from BIOS, and the depth of flavor just sure wasn't there. So we unfortunately have to keep it to a year, but it sticks around for a couple months when it's on.
You know, we're not exchanging money back and forth most of the time. It's collaborative in the sense that, too, that we're like, okay, we need like a little bit of space in the cooler, and rather than them being like, okay, pay us X amount per month, it's like, okay, can you take the spent grain from us?
So one of the strange things about brewing is the waste of it, which is all this weight of grain that you use to make the beer, and afterwards it seems kind of silly to just throw it into a landfill, and it can be used for feeding some livestock. And one of the other great options it is of the spent grain is to use it as a soil amendment.
That's the other thing, it's very cyclical. Like, we brought, you know, 75 or 80 pounds or however, you know, multiple batches of cucumbers over there, and then a few days later we're bringing that beer with like the mashed up cucumber and grain and everything that then we dump in the fields and like compost, and we're going to be growing in those fields again in another year or 2, you know.
There's a little bit of a camaraderie, especially on Blue Island, that we've seen. That's one of the things that drew us here so much, is that business to business, everybody's rooting for Blue Island. So you bringing people down to Blue Island means that Blue Island does better, and when Blue Island does better, so do the other businesses in there. So I think no matter what partnership you end up having, if it brings more people to Blue Island, I think everybody, businesses are all up for it for sure.